So Leah, you've joined. It'd be great to hear where you're from. The questions you have, and if you're booking a trip, if you're just interested in thinking, we'd love to tailor the content accordingly.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, where are you calling in from?
I'm calling from Australia. My friend in America is in a wheelchair, and we're planning to go to Japan from October the 13th to November the 3rd. So, yeah, and got some specific questions about wheelchair access and that sort of thing. So,
perfect.
But Iris couldn't, and it's really weird because I've got this message coming up on my screen saying this browser version is no longer supported. Please upgrade. And I thought, oh, I'm not going to be able to get in. So I'm sorry if you can't see me. It's because I'm technically challenged.
Oh, you're fine. You're fine. That's great. So if you have any specific questions, maybe drop them in the chat if you know how to do that.
Well, it's very difficult because I'm only using a small iPhone.
Perfect. Tell me what your questions are so I can write them down so we know we get through them.
Oh, thank you. What's the most dependable wheelchair taxi service? Is there a company that's specifically for wheelchairs in Tokyo or Kyoto? That's
I'm just going to write them all down so that we can put them in. Yeah.
And if you've got any you can recommend, we need the names and telephone numbers. And do we have to book in advance? Would the drivers be English speaking? That's not so. My Japanese is basic. Iris's is probably not. So I can I know enough to basically get around Hidari, Migi, that sort of stuff. Do the cab companies operate from Haneda Airport, because that's where we're going into? And then do they accept things like Uber, or how does it work for payment?
Okay.
That's another one. And we're looking for a SIM card to go local on a phone, the phone service, because roaming's terribly expensive with Telstra in Australia, and I'm not sure about Iris in America. So are they available at the airports to be able to purchase SIM cards there? Or would we do it from the hotel, or where would we do it?
Okay, great. All right, we're gonna mute everybody so that we can get started in a few minutes. Yeah. But we will definitely do that.
I'm so thrilled that I've been able to get through, and all I can see with these
morning. Oh yeah. We'll go through all these questions. Okay, perfect.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
It's 3 questions, Leah. You were on Tabby Folk earlier, right? I believe you had some questions, I think.
All right, everybody is joining in. We're going to give everybody a moment to get settled because we're a minute or two early. But Josh and I would really love to know where you're calling in from. So far, we have somebody, Leah's from Australia. We have people, I think, all over the globe. I'm actually in Boston. My name is Karen Morales. I'm a travel advisor and a wheelchair user, and I just did my first trip this summer for 18 days to Japan. Was able to meet Josh in person, tour some hotels, so that is amazing. And Josh, as people are joining in, why don't you give people a little description of who you are?
Sure, yeah. I'm feeling a little bit nervous because I'm seeing a lot of Japanese names here now, so I can't tell any lies, so I have to be honest about everything in Japan. So yeah, my name is Josh. I run Accessible Japan and Tabby Folk. Just a visual description, if that's important, then I will say that I'm a mid-40s Caucasian male with short brown hair and glasses and a goatee. I'm wearing a black t-shirt. Yeah, so that's me.
Wonderful. Well, today's webinar, we really wanted to make sure that we could cover some of the basic questions that both Josh and I tend to get asked often about Japan. And since Josh is the expert, I am going to pose each question to him, as he is not only a traveler in Japan, but he lives there. And then I'm going to chime in with sort of my observations from our trip this summer. So the first question I want to pose to the audience, has anyone ever been to Japan? If you could just drop that in the chat, that would be super helpful. And is anybody planning a trip? We already heard from Leah that she's planning to go later this year. And I would just love to know if anyone has any other specific questions. You can just drop them in the chat. The first place that we like to start, right, is a little overview for those of you who haven't been. And I think because Japan has really raised in popularity, specifically with North American and even European audiences in the last year, I want to start with a pretty easy question for Josh. Josh, what do you think makes Japan such a great accessible trip?
I would say that's probably the hardest question because there's so many great things about Japan. So I mean, I think that Japan has a really great history and culture, lots of exciting things to do. I was talking with a friend recently, and she was talking about right now it just sort of finished Obon, which is like a traditional festival for people that go back to their hometowns, and it's sort of time to go back to your family, and you go to your family grave, and it's sort of like the Day of the Dead kind of thing in Mexico, maybe. And so she was telling me about some of the food that they ate in their hometown, and some of my other Japanese friends had never even heard of it. So you get this like really great variety, even though it's a very small country. Lots of rich history and food and delicious stuff. And also like there's a lot of like really great hospitality here in Japan. There's a real focus on omotenashi, which is like sort of like thinking about somebody's needs before they've even thought about them themselves, and try to prepare for that person and to make sure that they have everything they need without having to ask. So there's lots of really amazing things happening in Japan, and we'll get into the accessibility, I think, after this.
Perfect. Well, coming from my vantage point, so I'm also a wheelchair user, and I traveled with my 2 teenagers in June. I would say, to lean into what Leo was asking about, the public transportation in Japan is unmatched. So I don't think that you really need to use a lot of cabs unless you're doing a long distance transfer from one place to another. The metro, the trains is fantastic and very easy to navigate. We will dive into that a little bit more deeply. The food is unrivaled. I mean, it's amazing. Everything from, spicy chicken cutlets at 7-Eleven or Family Mart to more omakase or higher end restaurants. And the pizza in Tokyo is phenomenal. Really, really good. So those 2 things, I think, really made it a pretty exemplary trip for sure for us. And it's just safe and clean. And I think that is something that you don't always find, especially here in the United States. Josh, we get asked this question really often. What do you feel like people get wrong when they're thinking about traveling to Japan?
Yeah, I think unfortunately, because of a lot of travelers and their SNS posts, I think there's a lot of misconceptions about Japan from an accessibility point of view. There's a lot of things where you'll see people, the ones that get the most traction or interaction are usually the sort of way out there kind of things. So you'll see people getting pushed onto trains that are super crowded, or you'll see these like beautiful temples in the middle of a forest with these moss covered steps leading up to them. And of course, those are all true things, but they tend to get the biggest attention, and so people then go from that and assume that all of Japan is like that. And if you're coming in as a person with a disability, you'll see those things and think, oh, I can't get on that train, or I can't visit that cultural spot. And you can get this idea that Japan is not accessible. And I think that's really quite far from the truth. I think you experienced a lot of that when you were here, but there's, it's an incredible place to get around from in terms of accessibility, and is making a lot of great progress as well. So I think that, the biggest thing is that people think it's not accessible. And I definitely push back on that and say that, it's a really accessible place and it's getting better all the time. That's probably the biggest misconception, I'd say. Oh, I think you're muted.
Perfect. I would say something similar, but maybe just a tiny hair different. I would say people get, oftentimes, because I'm a travel advisor, I hear that people think traveling Japan is really hard. And I found that to be almost the complete opposite. I think people are intimidated because the language is obviously not as easy to pick up if you don't speak Japanese. But I would say there were kind of 3 pillars that I was surprised on how easy it is. The first would be the transportation system. It was phenomenally easy, much more so than someone asked about accessible cabs. I never had a positive experience with a non-pre-booked accessible transfer in Japan. I never had one cab that was supposedly like a black cab with a ramp like London that actually worked. So to me, after trying that a couple of times, I gave up. But the metro is phenomenal, and Google Maps does a great way of showing the step-free access points. 2 things to know that I didn't think were truly intuitive, or I'm just, slower than the rest of the folks, is that if you're traveling with family, everybody needs to put a Suica card on their phone. So I learned the hard way that I had put one Suica card with a lot of money on my phone thinking I could swipe for me and the kids. No. So the way that it works when you go through a lot of the turnstiles is you just tap your phone and it knows where you go and charges you accordingly depending upon where you get off. So that is an amazing feat of, efficiency, but you all need a card on your phone. I did find that you just go up to the booth and say, I am going to X stop, and there will always be somebody with a ramp waiting to get you off the train. That certainly doesn't happen in New York. I was just at Penn Station, Monahan Station last week. They knew I had a wheelchair. I was the only one on the train, and still there was like nobody there, and they couldn't find a person with a ramp. But Japan, that never happened once. So I think that's really interesting. The second piece I think that you need to think through is, while the hotels are all beautiful at all price points, from an accessibility lens, more expensive can be more accessible, and I'll explain why. In the Western hotels, the beds are usually more standard height, and there is more room space. So we stayed in an absolutely beautiful hotel in Kyoto. It was a DoubleTree by Hilton. It was maybe $200 a night. The breakfast was phenomenal. The service was phenomenal, but the beds were a little raised off the floor, and the footprint of walking into the room, if you bring like a checked piece of luggage, there's no place to leave that open to be able to get in and out of. So it is a bit like Tetris or stacking Legos in some of the smaller rooms. So I think that that's going to matter, especially if you're traveling with a larger power chair or you have a lot of medical equipment. And if transferring on and off of a very low service is difficult, then you need to be a little bit more mindful about where you're staying. And on the call today, as we're going to definitely open this up to Q&A towards the end, we have Flat Care, which is a tour company in Japan that I was introduced to only a few weeks prior to my trip. And between Josh and Flat Care, it would not have been such a beautiful trip if they weren't there helping to support us. I unfortunately had my wheelchair break upon landing, which has never happened to me in my, 50 trips that I've taken post wheelchair. And if it wasn't for Hayato and team that were at the airport, I don't think I could have navigated that with any ease. And I might have been the first person to cry in public in the Tokyo airport. So,
I'm sure that's not true.
They looked pretty terrified when I was crying. Okay, so the next question is, what is a great itinerary for a first-time visitor? I'd love to hear yours, and then I'm happy to give people my idea of what was great.
Yeah, well, I think that, just like any country, if you're going to it for the first time, there's always going to be the standards. So there's, in Japan, what we call the golden route, which is Tokyo, Kyoto, and Osaka. Sort of like going to Italy and going to Rome and Milan and Valencia or something like that. So those are the main ones that people go to. And so it's just, if you're only going to come once to Japan, like those are the places you're going to come to, I think. Obviously the airports you're either going to come into Tokyo or into Osaka. And so you'll definitely be doing one of those. But I would encourage people to take a lot of time to do day trips from those different towns. From Tokyo, you can go to Mount Fuji fairly easily. We can also go to Kamakura. I like Kamakura. It's not as popular. It's being more popular, but it's a little bit less known. It's only about, depending on where you're in Tokyo, it's less than an hour from Tokyo, but it's one of the old ancient capitals, and from about 800 years ago or more. So you get these really, old temples and buildings in a sort of a quiet town. But it's also got this really interesting surfer vibe as well, because it's on the ocean. So you have this mixture of young and trendy surfers and 800-year-old temples and stuff like that. And so it's it's a neat place to go. And it's a day trip from Tokyo. If you're in Osaka, you can easily go to Hiroshima and some of the places there as well. And there's lots of different places you can go around those. But I'd probably have those as your first trials if you're going to come to Japan.
Yeah, we definitely did that golden route, except we added a little bit to it. So Tokyo is a huge city. If you've been to New York or Rome, there are very many different distinct neighborhoods. We ended up spending 6 nights in Tokyo, which I thought was really great. If you had enough time, you are exhausted, especially if you're coming from North America that first night. I mean, deeply, deeply tired. So it would have been a little bit difficult to rally. From there, you can sort of center your activities around different parts of Tokyo. I think hitting the Meiji Shrine or the fish market early in the morning, one of your first days of arrival when you're already up early, is pretty fun. Do know that, restaurants in Tokyo and even coffee shops tend to open a lot earlier than the US, which is interesting. But you can always get a crazy good coffee in a vending machine, which is still beyond me, that the cold brew coffee for $1 in the vending machines in Japan is 10 times better than Starbucks, I believe. I think if you can add a night in a ryokan and an onsen experience, which is the Japanese kind of spa hotel in between Tokyo and Kyoto, I thought that was a really nice way to get sort of a change of pace before going into Kyoto. I think if you asked my family, everybody liked Kyoto the most as a city because it's just beautiful and a little more quaint. I can't even think of a great example in the United States. Maybe it's more like Quebec or Montreal in Canada. I can't really think of a US alternative, but it's a pretty small city, maybe more San Francisco, but it's not on the coast. Tokyo was great because there was so much to do between team labs and food and the Meiji Shrine and the fish market. And we went to the anime area and did the electronics, and my kids did gaming in a classic arcade. We had something going on at every time, and it's such a walkable / rollable city. Also, if you're vision impaired, I thought they had such a great routing. All of the sidewalks have sort of a raised sensory patch, so you could easily find your way around. And then we spent the least amount of time in Osaka. I would say Osaka has a really good food scene, and if you like to thrift, either cool clothes, especially for men. I've never seen cooler male street fashion. And food, that was great. And then the highlight of my trip, which isn't usually on the normal route, was we went to Okinawa, which I adored. Japanese version of Hawaii, arguably almost cleaner water, very accessible in multiple places. And I thought that was just an amazing way to end the trip, because it really did give you that sense of calm and zen, which I loved. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about first-time visitors and if people are coming back or have traveled before. One of the other things that comes up a lot, and I know this is one of your most Googled things on your site, Josh, is people coming beyond mobility devices, people coming to Japan with food allergies. And mind you, this was my first trip to Asia with a son with an anaphylactic peanut allergy. So that was our first time dealing with that. So we talk a little bit about food allergies and when people travel with chronic illnesses that might have specific prescription medications. I know there are some laws in Japan about what you can and can't take in the country.
Yeah, I think that allergies is something obviously that do exist here, but for most people, if you say allergies, they're going to think of like the hay fever that they get in the spring, as opposed to something that's a food-related allergy or something that could be dangerous to somebody. It hasn't been as big of a epidemic here as in other places, so you'll need to be a lot more careful about what's in things that you eat, especially around if you have like shellfish allergies or wheat allergies, because you can be surprised at what's in what. Sometimes, it can also be, if you have specific religious dietary constrictions as well, you have to remember that sometimes the soup that you're drinking tastes delicious, but it might be made from something that you shouldn't be, consuming. And so it's really important, I think, to just sort of maybe look up what you're going to eat, and also maybe have some sort of vocabulary prepared, like even something on your phone that you can just quickly show somebody. Say, I have this allergy. Is that included in this meal? Now, unfortunately, a lot of times, unlike places in the States where it's easy to make like custom orders, a lot of places in Japan don't do custom. So you can't just say, make this without this. A lot of times the restaurants won't do that for you. And it's sort of more like, no, this is what the meal is. So you might have to come up with an alternative. So you can also use a lot of things like, Gemini or something like that, or other Google searches to figure out what's in things. It's getting more and more common. You will see some allergy markings on packaging, like for wheat or different things like that, but it's still nothing like in States or other places. So it's really important to be able to ask those questions in whatever way that you can do that. And for other things like, different disabilities, I've been making Accessible Japan over the last number of years. I've been challenged about how little I know about other disabilities often. And so something's come up for me, like, for example, one time I was asked, about a place that I visited and written about, and somebody asked, does it have benches? And since I'm a power wheelchair user, I'm always in my wheelchair. I never thought about needing to sit down. And that's something that comes up a lot in Japan, is that there aren't that many places to rest. There's not like in the parks and a lot of other places where there's lots of benches to sit down on or in public. So it can be something you need to really plan it through when you're thinking about your day. You might want to look for cafes or other places where you can go in and sit and just take a rest through your day. For people with vision disabilities, as you mentioned before, the tactile blocks, they're actually invented in Japan, which is something that's, I think, little known. Back in the 1960s, somebody in a city between Osaka and Hiroshima in Okayama, he invented the tactile blocks as a safety measure for people going to school for the visually impaired in his city. And then they got picked up by the National Railway, and then sort of gone out throughout the world because of that. But so actually, I've heard from a lot of people with visual impairments that say that traveling in Japan is quite easy because of the tactile blocks, but also a lot of street crossings have audio signals as well, so you know when to cross or not. So that's something that's quite good. For people, with hearing differences, sign language is different. So that's something to remember. It's not ASL here or BSL or something like that. It's there's a Japanese sign language. It's completely different than other sign languages. So that won't be easily translated. There is a company called Japan Sign Travel. They specialize in translation between ASL and Japanese Sign Language, and they can offer tours for that as well. But a lot of places you'll find now, like in hotels, transportation centers, they'll often have a place where you can write things and sort of exchange messages. It's becoming less important now because everybody has their phone with them where you can write things down. But there's definitely ways to communicate. Might just be a little bit different than the way it is at home. Oh, can you read it again, Karen?
You'd think I'd learned the lesson, but I haven't learned it yet. I was pleasantly surprised with how easy the food allergy was to navigate. There were some situations when we mentioned the peanut allergy where they could have the right to refuse service to you, which is fine because, like I said, it is an art the way that they cook the food. So they want to know ahead of time and they want to be clear on whether they can accommodate. I think multiple allergies, if they are not some of the 7 that are labeled, peanuts happen to be one of them, could get a little challenging. So you might have to think pretty carefully about what hotel is going to provide a lot of your meals. The hotels will all do it. The hotels will also, in some cases, provide hospital beds or other bigger equipment. And then one other thing that was different that I think if you're traveling with a wheelchair, you should be used to is when I landed in Hong Kong and then again in Tokyo, it was the first time in my experience as a wheelchair user where somebody said, "What's wrong with you?" Like literally wanted a diagnosis to write on the form. So I think as somebody living in a Western country, that is nice to be prepared for, that is just culturally something that is asked. I was not expecting that at first. I was confused. And then I realized she literally wanted to know exactly what my diagnosis was and answer more specific health questions. And then in various places, they did things like take temperatures or do a little more analysis to make sure that you were not like bringing in a communicative disease. And it was actually like a situation that you were in more permanently. That was interesting. Somebody asked about Google Translate. We did use Google Translate. Oftentimes, even in the train stations, the conductors would speak into Japanese in an audio Google Translate, and then they would read back to me in English with a voice version, which was awesome. And I think in terms of the meds, Josh has some good lists on what is able to be brought into the country and not. I think one of the ones that is less common for Western folks is like none of the ADD medicines are allowed, correct? I think that's one of the categories of drugs that are not allowed. Yeah.
I would like probably to defer. First of all, say I'm not a medical professional. I'm not a lawyer.
We are not medical
like
professionals.
or law professionals. But yeah, Japan is stricter than other countries and has different rules. So there's some medicines that are prescribed medicines in your country that may not be allowed in Japan, but there are also even some that are over-the-counter medicines in some countries that are not allowed in Japan as well. So it's really important to look up whether your medicines are allowed in. You might need to do something, for example, only have a certain number of, 2 weeks or something like that worth of medicine, so you don't go over a certain threshold. But also there's some that are just no matter what threshold it is not allowed. So I think it's also really important to have clear labeling on your medicines. Don't put up into a separate pill case or something like that in case you need to show what the medicine is. It means maybe taking more stuff with you, which can be a hassle, but it's probably safer than a plastic bag full of pills. And so, but the most important thing is there's a Japanese system for checking out what medicines are allowed and getting permission. If there's some medicines you're allowed to bring in with permission. And so I haven't used it myself, but there is something from controlled substances questionnaire place that you can ask questions to. That's official from the government, and they will let you know. You might also want to talk to your local consulate for Japan. But it definitely has to be better safe than sorry for some medications for sure. There's been cases where people, it might not be that they get arrested, but they have their medicine confiscated or something like that. So it's really important to look that up before you go, especially if it's important for your daily needs.
And when I think about I think the next question, and then we might turn it over to see if people have some questions in the chat. So if you guys have specific travel questions, why don't you start putting them in the chat so Josh and I can sort of check them off. But if I think back to some of my favorite travel experiences in the various cities that we went to, for Tokyo, we did a really early morning experience at the Meiji Shrine and really learned with a guide on how to kind of release your prayers and how to do the ceremony and the offering in the proper way. I really thought that was important and it really cool to do. We love doing the Shinjuku crossing. We did that one morning, which was fun. The kids loved Team Labs. I was actually in a meeting with Josh when they did that, so I missed Team Labs. We were together.
Sorry.
That's okay. We had a good time. We had killer ramen that was amazing. We had killer pizza that we made reservations for that was amazing. We loved walking through the palace gardens. That was really quite impressive. We enjoyed going to Don Quixote and getting some of the really wonderful things. If you are a global cosmetic aficionado, my daughter says that the acne cream at Don Quixote is the best thing that ever exists, and it's better than everything. We enjoyed taking the trains. We enjoyed going into a taste test for 7-Eleven and Family Mart. We enjoyed all these sort of like silly off the beaten path. And the kids really loved the anime district and going in to play old video games and do kind of like a pop culture tour, which was amazing. People are still asking about transportation. So I would say do the public transportation. I did not find any of the taxis to work to actually stay in my chair.
Yeah. So just jumping on that. So the trains, so there's, obviously there's the subways, there's local trains, and there's intercity trains, usually the Shinkansen. So there's 3 different types of trains. The taxis and, the trains and subways, there's a law in Japan now that any station with over 3,000 daily users is required to have an accessible route. That might necessarily be the best route. It might not necessarily be in an elevator. It might be one of those like stair climbing machines or something like that. But it should be accessible. So for the most part, anywhere in Tokyo or Osaka or Kyoto, you're not going to need to worry about whether a station is accessible because they will all have some sort of accessibility. Just the general way that you do it is you go to the station that you're getting on it and you tell the staff, if you're in a wheelchair anyways, or if you have a visual impairment, they can also guide you. You tell the staff where it is you want to go. They'll take you to the platform or tell you where to meet them on the platform. Then they'll call ahead. They'll put a ramp down for you. They'll call ahead to your destination or your transfer. Somebody will be waiting there for you.
Always.
And they'll guide you out. So you don't actually, it's sometimes easier than being a non-disabled tourist because you don't need to try to figure your way through the stations at all because they'll just guide you. For the taxis, the challenges there are many. So back before the Olympics and Paralympics in 2020, they brought out the Japan taxi, it's called. So it looks like a sort of miniaturized version of a London black cab, but it's not as big. And it was something that's sort of like the ultimate designed by committee, but good for no one kind of situations. The company that made it, Toyota, they've actually, they've done some renovations on it, but they've also, realized that they didn't do a great job on it, especially for accessibility. And as Karen mentioned, they all should have a ramp in them, but the vast majority, even now when I try to use them, the vast majority of the drivers don't know how to use it. So more often than not, I'll have a little PDF that I carry with me to say, okay, pull here, lift this up, do this kind of thing, and I'll be the one that ends up guiding them. But even if you can get in, if you're a wheelchair user, because of the way that it's designed, you have to lift up some seats and stuff like that. At most, you can only get one wheelchair user and one companion in it. So it's not really an option for families, I would say. There's enough trunk room for your suitcases and stuff like that, but it's definitely a challenge. So there's many of them, but if you're traveling as more than one person and, it can be stressful to talk to people to try to get them to do something that might be best to avoid. There are pre-booked ones that are bigger vans with lifts in the back that you can order as well. However, they tend to be a lot of times run by individuals, and so they're single operators kind of thing, sole providers. So they might not speak English. They might not be available to book easily. So that's where a company like FORA Travel can come in, because they can help book for you in different cities. They'll find it and arrange everything for it and take care of the language issues. So those are some of the challenges. The Shinkansen, so the bullet train between cities, it is accessible, but sometimes it can be a challenge to get the accessible seats. You can do it on some lines, and you can do it on your phone sometimes or online, but it can also depend on what train lines. If you're going north, the system is different than if you're going west and stuff. So due to different companies. So again, a travel company, it can be a really, really great help for that. And they all have accessible toilets in them as well. So they're quite easy to use.
I would for sure hire a guide, or if you're at one of the nicer hotels, they will show you how to use the metro the first day.
Mhm.
And once we discovered how to use the metro, we were like, why did we even bother with cabs? And we would only use it for distances that were like over like 4 kilometers, because it was under 4 or 5 kilometers. We just rolled or walked, because it's such an easy city to get around in. I think a really good thing I also didn't know, Nick has a great question about restaurants. So yes, there are lots of restaurants that have steps. However, there are full worlds built under the ground around Japanese train stations and under office buildings and within really high-end malls. And you think a high-end malls, you think I'm trying to tell you you're going to go eat Arby's in Japan. That is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like Michelin star ramen in a tiny little environment. So if you feel like you're in a situation where you can't get into any of the restaurants on the street front, go to a major train station and eat somewhere within the train station. There's usually many restaurants, and like things like the Kite Center or any of the big mall kind of environments always have a couple floors of restaurants, and they're all usually more or less step free. The thing to also remember is that the restaurants in Japan tend to be one type of food. So if you go and get sushi that you expect in the United States is not what you're going, or other places is not what you're going to be getting. You're going to be getting more sashimi over a bed of rice. Like I really didn't see many like sushi rolls when I was in Japan, or hand rolls. It was more fresh fish that was insane and beautiful. So if you want just a skewer of meat, then you're going to go to remind me what we call that.
Yakitori?
Yes,
Yakitori?
yakitori. So it's all sort of separated in those ways. But we were able, once we realized that there were all these like hidden mall food court situations, and it's much better than like a food court, then it opened up a lot of possibilities for us for dining, and it made it a lot easier to find things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I say that, the shopping malls and train stations have a lot of variety that you probably would not expect, and that can be great. Even the smaller restaurants, a lot of times they are too difficult to get in a wheelchair, but sometimes you can find ones that have seating outside. If you're going to Ueno, there's some places around there in the markets there, Ameyoko. They've got some places that have seats outside, so it's not like you're expecting maybe Paris or Rome or something like that, but it's a bit more of a local kind of thing. Hopidori, which is near Asakusa, which is one of the main temples, also has a lot of outdoor seating, so you can get that sort of real local, small vibe, but on the street, so you don't have to worry about getting in to things. I'd also add in that a lot of places that Karen was mentioning there, in department stores and train centers, they'll also usually on the same floor have a really nice, large unisex accessible toilet available. So which is really nice to have as well. So you don't need to worry about that when you go to those places. So that can help a lot as well.
I've never seen more public accessible toilets that were spotless than Japan, like beyond. Although this is TMI, but it's important to know, if you are transferring yourself on and off of a wheelchair off of the Japanese toilets, you have to be a little careful of the water feature, because it can catch you off guard and you can end up with wet clothes, which did happen to me once.
Watch where you put your hand,
yeah, you just watch where you put your hands, or you're going to end up being sprayed with water, which is interesting.
But you come back with a great story. So
yeah, you come back with a great story. So there's always that. What about a personal care attendant, Josh? What say you about that?
Yeah, so it's not impossible. For sure, you want to get in touch with a company like Flight Care, Flight Travel. There's also another one that does specialize in providing caregivers or nurses. However, it's going to be expensive. To be truthful, a lot of places they'll charge $50 or even $100 per hour, and they might have some sort of minimal charge as well. Though you might have to order, or might have to have at least 3 hours or something like that. So, well, not impossible. It's definitely something that is quite expensive that you either need to budget for, or you find it might be easier to take somebody with you from your home country in that case. But it is possible. There's obviously going to be language barriers. Certain medical procedures probably can't be done necessarily. So more basic stuff would probably be okay, but something a little bit more medically invasive would probably be a bit more of a challenge, I think. But I mean, it's always something you can talk with the companies that are providing it, see what they can do, see what is in your budget, and what you can do from there. So, but possible, but difficult and expensive. Yeah.
So we have covered a lot of the Japan basics. Obviously, Josh's website at Accessible Japan has like a wealth of knowledge and hotel reviews at all different price points, as well as reviews of attractions and other things you can do or need to know when traveling to Japan. Anthony's group, The World is Accessible, is always there to ask questions and see people's firsthand reports. And if you need any help, connecting to a trip, I'm happy to help. I'm Karen Morales from FORA. I run accessibility, and we work with The World is Accessible as their travel partner. But we want to hear your questions. Like, stump us, put them in the chat. Tell us what you're planning and what you're worried about. And we're going to put Josh and I on the hot seat, probably Josh. So really push it out there. And then maybe also if the team from Flat Care wants to put any, tips or tricks in the chat from their experience in planning for families, let us know. I mean, I would say that one of the things that I liked about Japan is that it is a really great trip if you're going with family, regardless of the age of the kids. You could do it with toddlers, you could do it with teenagers, you could do it with 20-somethings, and you'd have a really cool experience. A few of the things that I didn't know from Instagram or from watching was the path up to the bamboo garden in Kyoto is a little steep, for sure. Yeah. And yeah, Anthony, you can definitely unmute yourself and help answer questions. So that was steep. It was post rain for us. We were there during some typhoons, so we were slipping and sliding. Yeah, I mean, it really depends, Jane, on how you want to plan your trip. I don't know that you necessarily need like a dedicated guide driver through Japan. I think that's probably a little overkill. I do think if you want to have a more stress-free experience, then contracting with a full service company like Flat Care, who can help you pick your hotels, ensure that they're accessible, and have those conversations. And then pick a couple of the places where you might need a guide to really get a good experience is a nice way to do it. Yeah, I mean, Flat Care would be my recommendation for going to Japan with, we call it like a destination tour operator. I mean, they have really deep connections. And honestly, I travel all the time and I try out partners around the world. And what I thought was so different about Hayato, I don't even know if I should tell the story because it's going to be like, we're not going to do this for everybody. But I had a situation at a RioCon that we're partners with. And even after multiple follow-ups, there were steps to get into my room. And it's like they weren't really understanding how kind of inappropriate that was for like the level of hotel, and the kind of make good on that just wasn't really there. So, I mean, Hayato and team visited the next week and like had to sit down with the general manager and sort of tried to explain in probably a more effective way than the Annoyed American did as to why it wouldn't work and what could be better. Josh, I'm going to ping this question to you, and then I'm not skipping. I'm going to go up and read the questions. Can you talk a little bit about seasonality, time of year, differences?
Yeah.
So questions.
Japan is definitely very distinct 4 seasons. So you'll get, very cold winter, very hot summer. And so spring and fall are usually the best times to travel, I would say, especially if you have any problems with breathing. The humidity in Japan summer is quite difficult for many people. So that's something if you might want to consider when you come. My dad says he refuses to come anytime in the summer in Japan now. It's too hot. Whereas, the winter is not, it depends on obviously where you're from, but, it's not as cold in some places, but you can get a lot of snow in certain places as well. And there's skiing, there's some adapted skiing as well. But if you're looking for an easy time to travel, late April or about late March to early April is when you get the cherry blossoms. But depending on where you go in Japan, they can last until May as well. So the further north you go. And then in the fall, even up until September, it can be quite hot. So October, November is quite a good time to travel as well, for sure.
Somebody's asking about getting in with a disability access card or getting in with reduced cost to attractions. I don't think I did get in with reduced cost, but the cost is not wild for most things. Like, it does feel like relatively fair.
Yeah, there are most places offer a disability discount. However, the rules are usually strictly tied to Japanese medical disability certificates. We have in Japan, we have looks like a little passport with your picture and your disability listed on it. And so, even if you show up in a wheelchair that is very customized and probably costs $20,000, if you don't have the Japanese pass, they still won't let you get a disability discount. It can really depend, because particularly in private places that are privately run places, it's really sort of up to the person. It's not like a legal issue kind of thing. So it can sometimes depend on who's at the desk the day that you buy your tickets. That some person might say, yeah, it's fine, here, I'll give you a discount. Others might be sticklers for well, it says you need to show me this, certificate and you don't have it, so I can't give you a discount. So my advice in general is get whatever disability certificate or medical notification translated to bring with you. Try to use it, but don't expect that you can. And just be, think of it as a bonus if you can use it. I know there are some things that are in the works to hopefully make it easier for some places to be able to transfer it to here in Japan, but it's still something that's sort of up in the air kind of thing.
Iris, so booking an accessible taxi, I would say you have to be a little bit careful. Like a tour operator like Flat Care could help you book a fully accessible travel taxi from the airport. Otherwise, you're often better served, I think, by the metro, because the black cab taxis, we mentioned this earlier, I don't have the same connotation as they do in the UK. So they don't really work the same way, and they're unable to operate the ramp. But a tour operator like Flat Care could book you a transfer, or it's very easy to take the trains into the town. I personally did not rent a car because they drive for a US person like they do in the UK. So I was not going to drive on the quote unquote other side of the road. So you could rent a car. I would not at all bother to rent a car in Tokyo, Kyoto, or Osaka. That would be like renting a car as a traveler in New York. Like, I don't know why you would do that. That seems really hectic. Okinawa, sure. If you're at the beach, I think that would be a good option. I would have rented a car in Okinawa if I had somebody else who was legally able to drive it. I felt like I would kill somebody being on the other side of the
Well, like with any country around the world, like, the major urban centers have really good public transportation, but the further you go from those centers, you do face more challenges in terms of transportation, where you might like have the buses are all accessible, but in some smaller towns, it's only every third bus is accessible or something like that, or only on this route or that route. So in those cases, you might need to rely on an accessible taxi. For people coming on cruises, some of the stops where the cruises come into, they might not have easily accessible public transportation nearby. So you might want to do that spot by spot kind of thing. So that's something else to keep in mind.
In terms of money, I would say I used physical credit cards. I definitely took out yen because there were places where, I don't know, the kiddos would want like an ice cream, or we'd stop to get, I don't know, like a hand roll. Oh, we got amazing hand rolls walking up to the Kyoto Bamboo Garden. Or the Suica card is important. So if you have a Droid or an iPhone, I have an iPhone, you just download that to your phone, and then you like tap to pay. So they won't take Apple Pay per se, but they will take your Suica card. That's used for the metro, and that can be used at like 7-Eleven or Family Mart or in some of the just random places. Oh, the other unanticipated thing about Japan, the coffee is phenomenal. Like, I am a coffee snob. I love coffee. Definitely better than Italy. That might be a hot take, but I thought I had the best cappuccino of my life in
It's the second time you mentioned it now, so you must really love it.
yeah, no, it was amazing. I had the best cappuccino I've ever had in the Halekulani in Okinawa. Best of my life. Yeah, I think you want to learn the subway, the metro as soon as humanly possible, because it opens up so much to you and it makes it so much easier. Izakaya. So can you talk about that, Josh? I don't think and that's when you're eating kind of in your solo booth, correct? I was not able to find that.
No. So, izakaya is sort of like basically the equivalent of a Japanese pub.
Sorry, that's what it is.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So it's alcohol and food gathering kind of spot. So different than like an American bar where it's mostly just alcohol, and a restaurant which is mostly just the food. It's sort of a mixture that people go to often. Thanks for giving that, Kay. And so I've sent a link there for Nick as well, for finding wheelchair accessible restaurants in Japan. There definitely are izakaya that you can go to. I mean, I wouldn't let it. I wouldn't be discouraged. Just keep looking; you'll definitely find some. It's like I go to them frequently. So you do have to search a bit more than other people, I'd say, for sure. In the link I sent there, there are some places you might want to try looking at. One is a Japanese app called Wheellog. It's run by a wheelchair user. It's sort of like the Google Maps for wheelchair users, and what it does is people can leave reviews, comments, kind of thing for different places they visit, and they can say whether it's got steps or there's all these different features about it. It's translated into English as well, and even if not, you can probably figure it out for the most part by pictures that they have there. So that's one thing you can use to see if a place that you're interested in going to is accessible or not. Gurunavi is sort of like a Yelp kind of service. They have started in doing filters for accessibility on the restaurants there. I would take it with a bit of a grain of salt though, because it is self-reported. So there's nobody out there verifying, if they say yes, it's accessible. There's no person who's steeped in accessibility or a person with a disability that's going and actually verifying those things. So you might find places that say they are accessible but have a step into them, or the opposite end of things where they say, oh, we're not accessible because they don't have the confidence to say they are, but they really are accessible. So it can be a good starting point. So I'd use those for sure, but definitely you can do it.
Any last questions before we wrap up? I think of like many locations that I've been, Japan was one of the easiest, even with some of the challenges that I had about getting a new wheelchair. It was beautiful. Although I think as a Western folk in Japan, you lean into the fact that the culture is so respectful and so kind, quiet and well done. It's like a beautifully wrapped present, right? It's just everything is well done. However, at the same time, there will sometimes be rules and regulations that feel like not efficient and strange. And I think you have to understand that in those cases, like there is not a lot of personal empowerment to bend the rules. So the rules are the rules are the rules. And there's no reason getting upset because you're not going to even be able to take the path less traveled that seems like it would be a better way. And I had to learn that with, the wheelchair. Like, for example, I was able to rent a new wheelchair after mine broke, but I wasn't able to like buy the rental wheelchair. And I wasn't able to do that online. It had to be done in person. Just a lot of little things like that in, the US or Canada, or maybe some other countries, it would be like, yeah, that just makes sense. Like, just do it that way. But that was not going to happen. So it's good to have a partner based on the ground. Oh, my favorite place other than Okinawa is probably Kyoto, for sure, just because the little streets were so beautiful, and we liked getting out into nature. If we had a little more time, we probably would have gone to Nara. Well, actually, we were on our way to Nara, and there was a train derailment, so that was interesting. And yes, we're going to post this webinar for us to read, as well as we're going to turn the transcript into like a little article of best practices with a little Q&A. Because I think that sometimes some people don't want to watch videos. Some people would rather just like skim the data. So we're going to do that as well.
For sure.
And then I think one other thing to know, I didn't know this, there's seismic activity in Japan. We had a couple of earthquakes when we were there. I grew up in California, so I was not new to that. But when you're on the 22nd floor of a building, it sways like a boat, like the building sways. Nobody had ever told me that, so I was not sure if I was about to die. I think what I had found out after that moment is Japan has the most advanced, best built buildings to withstand large seismic activity, but it feels different in a high rise because you are swaying. And that can be a little disconcerting to the average bear, like myself, where I was telling my kids we were definitely in an earthquake, and I'm not really sure what we're supposed to do on the 22nd floor. I believe the answer is stay put. Is that correct, Josh?
I'm not a legal, but yeah, no, I would say that's it. I was actually in a recent video for accessibility features at one of the hotels in Kabukicho. It was the Blue Star Hotel in Groove Shinjuku. We did a video shoot there, and they actually have like an evacuation chair for getting down the stairs in case of emergency. So they'll know where you're staying when you check in, and their protocol is to go and check on you first if there's ever anything that happens, and they'll then bring the evacuation chair for you to help to get you out. So it's also maybe when you're checking in, it's a good thing to ask if there's an emergency, what should I do, kind of thing. So that they should have a plan for that. So I should ask that.
And I did love, back to the next question, I really did love Tokyo as a city. Like it's a really great city, and it's really safe and walkable. Yeah, Groove Shinjuku, we did stay there.
Yep.
That was great.
If I can just give one quick last note for hotels. One advice I think that I'd like to give. First of all, there's a rule that any hotel with over 50 rooms has to have an accessible room. They've changed it recently. It has to be 1% of the rooms. So there are more than there used to be, but you will find that if you're trying to stay in a smaller place, you might not be able to find an accessible room there. And it can be, unfortunately, that's the requirement they have for the number of rooms, but there are not necessarily rules as much as guidelines for accessibility of the rooms itself. So even if you get a room that says it's accessible, you might find quite a variety of what's defined as accessible. Some might be incredibly well thought out. Some might be like, I'm not sure what's accessible other than the fact that there's a bar next to the toilet. And so you need to keep those in mind. A number of people I've talked to who maybe are, manual wheelchair users, or for example, maybe in their home country, they'll not use the accessible room. They'll just stay in a standard room because that's fine for them. Some of the older hotels in Japan, even the standard rooms will have maybe a step or two inside of them, maybe a step to get into the bathroom. So I've had people, who have been quite surprised because they, oh, I'm fine with a standard room. I don't need the accessible room. And then they took into the standard room and they find a step to get into the room or a step to get into the bathroom and they can't use it. So that's something just to keep in the back of your mind when you're booking hotels.
Any last questions? And we're going to wrap up. Thanks to Josh and Anthony for putting this together. It's a great trip. Definitely happy traveling. Oh, good. I think people are finding it hopefully helpful and interesting. We're all in different time zones, Nick, so you just never know how it's gonna land when it's early morning and late night across the globe. In terms of, I didn't find many big buildings that didn't have a way to get in. Yeah, so I found it was pretty easy. Musi, if I probably pronounced that incorrectly, to get into the Tokyo buildings.
Mm-hmm. Some of them, will have like small ramps. Or any bigger building would likely have a ramp to it.
Have you have any comments, Josh, about cruise ports and accessibility?
Cruise port accessibility is a challenge. You definitely want to possibly try to arrange transportation there because a number of the ports are usually away from public transportation. And the idea is generally that the cruise line will provide some sort of bus to get you into the city or on some tour. And then more often than not, the bus that the cruise line provides is not an accessible one. It might be a highway bus where there are steps to get in, and then that's the only option. So I've heard of some people that they want to go on an excursion or at least get out and see the city, but they found they've been stranded in the port because it's too far away from other things, and then in that case they would need to book some sort of private accommodations.
Okay, great. Looks like people would like a little more information on Kyoto, and we will post this. And if you have additional questions, because usually when you hang out for something like this, then you think of, oh, I should have asked this. So when we post, add additional questions, and Josh and I will definitely answer them in the comments. Thanks everybody for taking time this morning, evening, afternoon, wherever you are in the world, and happy traveling. We hope to see you in Japan sometime soon.
Thank you for coming.